and this is More Than a Love Interest, the show where we talk about the arcs of female characters in film. Looks like there's been a lot of discussion lately about ladies in Tolkien's works. Lots of folks are weighing in, but I think there is one very important thing that I bring to the table that they don't.
I am no man.
Okay, so this is definitely not going to be in response to what the humorless Tolkien purists have to say on the subject.
Leave me alone, snake!
I'm sure we all have better things to do with our time.
Don't worry, Sam. Rosie knows an idiot when she sees one.
So big disclaimer, nothing I say in this video is meant to reflect on the Amazon show because I haven't finished it yet. Instead, I'm going to dive into the big question about Eowyn. Is she a feminist icon, rebelling against the patriarchy, or is she, and especially the ending of her story, just the result of sexism? Well, sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Okay, to start this off, let's explore option number 1.
Blah, 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 girl power, feminism, do you know what I mean? Oh, no.
Do you think Eowyn effectively utilized girl power by riding to war and murdering the Witch King of Angmar?
I don't know about that.
So on the side of icon status, a significant part of her plot is going against the assigned gender role she has in her society, and importantly, the story does not vilify her for this. She knows how to use a sword, which she claims all women in her country learned to do.
The women of this country learned long ago. Those without swords can still die upon them.
But then these bits make it clear that she is unique in wanting to go to war, in thinking that she should be this glorious hero in the songs, instead of having
To mind the children, to find food and bedding when the men return. What renown is there in that?
The clearest evidence that there is a patriarchy is this line from Eomer,
"War is the province of men, Eowyn,"
which was cut from the theatrical release. But anyway, she does rebel against this, and takes Merry with her in her rebellion against the patriarchy.
Whatever happens, stay with me. I'll look after you.
And of course the fact that this
I am no man.
is why she and Merry can destroy the Witch King adds to the feminist reading of the character.
Sauron has yet to reveal his deadliest servant. The one they say no living man can kill.
No man could kill him, but they can because they are not men.
Why should Merry be left behind? He has as much cause to go to war as you.
And this is certainly a powerful moment for her character in-universe as well, which I'll get more into when I talk about her character arc. Except, is she doing this for women everywhere? Or any other women? We notably don't really see any women in Rohan as more than like a flyover shot. Is she trying to prove that women should be allowed to go into combat just as much as the men? Is that why she disguised herself and went to war?
You cannot abandon the men.
What other duty would you have me do, my lord?
Why can he not fight for those he loves?
Well, no, not really. So why is she here? Well, because she's depressed. She's fallen deeply into despair. Both the book and the movie make it clear that she's pretty trapped at the beginning by her gender, yes, but also by the designs of the enemy.
Who knows what you've spoken to the darkness when all your life seems to shrink?
Aragorn shows up and she pins all of her hope on him as a way of escaping. When he lets her down a couple of times, that's really the last straw.
I cannot give you what you seek.
So she gives up and decides to die in battle. Both versions of the story have her in charge of her people when Theoden and Eomer leave.
The people are to follow your rule in my stead.
Which is quite an honor, and the book implies that it is not something women usually get to do. But to her, she has already watched Rohan drift deeper into darkness for years, and she does not want to do it again. She'll choose a swift death instead. When Aragorn says this in the books,
"A time may come for valor without renown. Who then will your people look to in the last offense?"
she has a much more intense response. All your words are but to say, you are a woman and your part is in the house. But when the men have died in battle and honor, you have leave to be burned in the house, for the men will need it no more.
A cage. To stay behind bars until use and old age accept them.
Which, that really cuts directly into the whole issue she's facing. And I am quite disappointed that movie Eowyn does not get to call out a male protagonist for his sexism like she got to do in the 40s. Can you imagine the kind of backlash a female character would get for saying that today? Now that's the in-universe reason for her actions. But what about what Tolkien was trying to say with this character? What was his point in having the lone, fleshed-out woman in the story act like this? Well, we're going to have to do a deep dive into the book, for reasons that will become clear, and look at who else does something similar. And can you guess who does pretty much the exact same thing? Not Merry. I mean, he joins her, but his reasoning is different. No, it's Faramir who takes the same action for the same reason.
You are fair and brave and have much to live for and many who love you.
Do not throw away your life so rashly. Your father loves you, Faramir.
Why can he not fight for those he loves?
I'll gladly give my life to defend her beauty.
Both are trapped and see only one escape.
Why have you come?
Do you not know?
I cannot give you what you seek.
If I should return, think better of me, Father.
That will depend on the manner of your return.
The two of them are narrative foils, but even more so, their father figures are foils. Theoden falls to darkness listening to the wicked counsel of Grima, and Denethor loses his faith because of what he learns from the Palantir. But they are not the same. We don't know exactly what either were told, though I would say we can glean that Grima is insisting on an isolationist view of the coming conflict. Basically, Saruman doesn't want to tempt open war just yet, and it fits his goal to have a slow decline where Theoden takes less and less interest in anything outside of his hall.
Why should I welcome you?
A just question, my liege.
Will you do nothing?
In contrast, Denethor is told secrets by Sauron that make him feel that he has all the answers. His general attitude is that Gandalf is useless and just tells him things he already knows.
You think you are wise, Mithrandir, yet for all your subtleties you have not wisdom. Do you think the eyes of the White Tower are blind? I have seen more than you know.
So when the company comes to Edoras, bringing Theoden out of his funk is partly driving out Saruman and Grima, but also needing to get Theoden to think of the big picture, to not just worry about his country, but to care about how he can help everyone.
I know what it is you want of me, but I will not bring further death to my people.
They free Eowyn in this way too, from having to be bound to serving Theoden so closely. He has a full redemption arc, giving up his isolationist ways to serve the greater good, even as it costs him his life.
Got knuckles for 8!
And Rohan will answer.
I go to my fathers, in whose mighty company I shall not now feel ashamed.
Again, this is in contrast to Denethor. He has been fed misinformation for years that tell him the end is nigh, that there is no one out there to trust or place his hope in, so he must impose his will on those around him.
As steward, you are charged with the defense of this city. Where are Gondor's armies? Send word to Theoden of Rohan. Light the beacons.
With your left hand you would use me as a shield against Mordor, and with your right you'd seek to supplant me.
The rule of Gondor is mine, and no others.
All he has is himself and his way of life, which is failing.
My father is a noble man. His rule is failing.
In the face of an evil that wins because it claims to be all-encompassing, and he believes it.
He will return. And when he does, we will be powerless to stop him. Bring me back this mighty gift.
So when his illusion of strength is shattered, his response is to abandon all of his high principles.
Rohan has deserted us. Theoden's betrayed me.
Abandon your post! Flee for your lives!
and then to try to burn his son alive.
It's burning. Already burning.
Compare this to Theoden, who insists on giving his people hope, even if he has none personally.
Look at my men. Their courage hangs by a thread. If this is to be our end, then I would have them make such an end worthy of remembrance.
Arise, riders of Theoden! Spears shall be shaken! Shields shall be splintered! And the sun rises!
Thus, we have these two rulers, both with minds poisoned by lies of the enemy. Theoden is freed of it because he loves his people and his niece. She is the first person he sees and recognizes when he returns to himself, and he understands acutely how much of a trial it has been for her to stand by his side, at least in the movie version.
Doomed to wait upon an old man who should have loved her as a father.
His last wish for her is that
I would have you smile again.
And in their final conversation, he assures her that she saved him, because she did. Not by any great deed, as Denethor demands, but just by being beloved by him.
Eowyn.
So his love for her is what saves him, essentially. Whereas I actually hate this line.
Your father loves you, Faramir. You will remember it before the end.
Because it seems like a significant doom to be placed on Faramir.
If I should return, think better of me, father.
Yeah, he remembered he loved you all right.
Set a fire in our flesh. Faramir.
Denethor is convinced that he alone can make a difference, and that leads him to a pretty unspeakable act. It's honestly one of the darkest things in Lord of the Rings, in my opinion.
Against the power that is risen in the east, there is no victory.
Anyway, this video is about Eowyn. What I'm saying is that both Theoden and Denethor fall into despair, and there is clearly a point being made about how they react to this. Both of their heirs, Eowyn and Faramir, follow in their footsteps, riding out to die in glorious battle because there is no hope for the future.
Take heart, Mary. It will soon be over.
You are fair and brave and have much to live for.
Never fitted me either. Boromir was always the soldier.
I think you have strength of a different kind, and one day your father will see it.
It would take a whole video to go into this in depth, but Tolkien is, I think, pretty clear on what he thinks about war.
His sense of duty was no less than yours, I deem. War will make corpses of us all.
Basically, it may be necessary, but wanting to go into battle is wrong. And both of these characters are doing so because the older generation let them down. So yeah, Eowyn slays the Witch King. Girl boss moments.
Now that is girl power.
This is not about how Eowyn is here for all of womankind, showing that they can kill the baddest of bad guys too, or even just that Eowyn can overcome everyone thinking she couldn't do it.
You didn't believe in me, but I believed in myself, just like the last scene of all movies.
This is about how Eowyn, a woman who hated her femininity and the restrictions it placed on her for her entire life, who is trapped by her love for her uncle, finds that this is actually the one thing she needs to have. That the part of herself she rebelled against had value all along and set her apart from everyone else.
I will kill you if you touch him.
Fool! No man can kill me.
I am no man.
And this further matches the main theme of Lord of the Rings.
Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
This is why the MacGuffin is a ring. Don't think just because something is small that it can't have power and impact. Merry and Pippin bring the Ents out of slumber just by being in the right place at the right time.
The coming of Merry and Pippin will be like the falling of small stones that starts an avalanche.
The Ents are going to war.
Frodo and Bilbo show mercy, and it saves the world.
It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand.
But now that I see him, I do pity him.
And Eowyn, though not expected to be on the battlefield, proves to be exactly what is needed to destroy
Sauron's deadliest servant.
Because Lord of the Rings, the book at least, is all about the dichotomy of despair and hope, and endurance, which requires hope. It is about how the smallest steps can make a difference, and you just have to keep taking that one more step forward, no matter how hopeless things look.
Come on. Let's just make it down the hill for starters.
All of this is to say that I think taking this moment out of the context of her despair is disingenuous. I wouldn't say it goes against Tolkien's vision or whatever pretentious dudes say, but I think it takes away from the power of the moment to treat it like, I am woman, hear me roar, instead of the turning point for a very realistic character.
I am going to save you.
On the other side, dude bros seem to only think it's acceptable because Tolkien hated how Macbeth used no man of woman born to just mean like a C-section or whatever. So Tolkien wrote no man can kill me to mean a woman could. But only because he was trolling on Shakespeare, not because he actually thought of women as people. Anyway, both ignore how essentially this fits into Eowyn as a character and the story as a whole.
Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
So does this moment give her feminist icon status? I mean, I think it depends on what wave of feminism we're talking. But overall, yeah, it's an essential moment for Eowyn, pivotal in her character arc, and obviously it relates to her conflict with regard to gender roles, as well as being just really, really cool. But again, it's important as more than just a girl power moment. So let's get into why it's such a big step for her personally.
I stood upon the brink. It was utterly dark in the abyss before my feet.
Alright, let's get a better understanding of Eowyn as a character. Let's talk about her character arc.
Ride with me.
Generally, I will be sticking with the films, but most of the steps are the same in the book until the end, which I'll discuss more in the next section. As always, I will be using Maureen Murdoch's heroine's journey. The first step is separating from the feminine. When we meet Eowyn, she is pretty deeply entrenched in her female role in society.
Doomed to wait upon an old man.
Will you not go to him? Will you do nothing?
And chafing against it. She's in her cage.
The walls of your bower closing in about you.
To stay behind bars until use and old age accept them.
Which is what she feels being a woman means. However, things are now changing. Theoden is freed, so she may be able to break free herself.
I've seen my niece smile for a long time.
Next, the heroine gains masculine allies. This includes Gimli and Legolas, but is mainly Aragorn.
It isn't much, but it's hot.
The reliance on him is more pronounced in the movie since the majority of her scenes are talking to him, but that may be more because of the different point of view than in the books. In any case, he is her main ally for the next several steps because he gives her hope. First for her own country, and then for an opportunity to escape her cage.
Where is she? The woman who gave you that jewel.
The Road of Trials is where the heroine goes through some adventures with her masculine allies. For Eowyn, her trials are a little more personal than heroines often get, as I would say they cover the majority of events in the Two Towers. Most of the time, these trials are fairly easy for the heroine to go through and don't much feed into her central conflict. Instead, Eowyn's trials only serve to prove to her how much she wants to continue to be separated from the feminine.
I can fight!
No!
She does her job in Helm's Deep, but she hates it. When she begs her masculine ally to help her, he refuses.
Let me stand at your side.
It is not in my power to command it.
So that's quite a trial for her.
I'm breaking in!
The trials are followed by the illusion of success, where the masculine allies are helpful, but will not be for long. I would say this is the victory at Helm's Deep, even if we barely see her afterward, and certainly this scene at the beginning of Return of the King.
Where's Aragorn here?
Even if he did not help her personally, Aragorn showed understanding in a way that no one else really has, and was able to lead her people to victory. So she's pretty happy right here.
I am happy for you.
The illusion is broken, and the heroine falls into despair. Eowyn rides out to the encampment, and Aragorn notices her sword. Perhaps she thinks he would let her join him in battle this time. Perhaps she's just doodling their wedding invitations. But either way, she's pleased with what is happening.
War is the province of men, Eowyn.
And then he leaves, and tells her that
it is but a shadow and a thought that you love.
He's trying to let her down easy, but damn. He's not wrong though, since her adoration is not really personal. It's more about him as the returning king than anything else.
You are both honorable men.
Theoden comes to take his leave of her, and she's at her darkest point. She's deeply despairing and hates more than ever her role in society that keeps her trapped.
What other duty would you have me do, my lord?
The descent is where the heroine has to go down deep into herself and reaffirm who she is. Obviously, this is her decision to go through with what she's always wanted to do. Abandon her responsibilities and ride to war. We don't get a lot of her in this step in the book or the film. We do have this scene where Mary understands what she wants.
You are fair and brave and have much to live for.
But in the book, we don't actually know who she is until the next step. So my minor complaint is that we really don't know what she's thinking here, but it's not really that kind of book.
To battle. To battle.
The next step is to urgently yearn to reconnect with the feminine. And that's short, but it's her biggest moment.
I am no man.
As I said, her arc is about how she is rebelling against the expectations of her gender.
I will kill you if you touch him.
And now she finally accepts the part of herself she has despised. That's pretty huge, I think. That's why it works as an awesome moment.
No man can kill me.
Reconnecting with her own feminine and realizing that that can mean whatever she wants it to mean is a significant turning point for her character, as well as being pretty awesome to watch. Next, Eowyn heals the split with the feminine. She has saved her uncle and speaks to him in his final moments, accepting who she is as his niece.
I know your face. Eowyn. I know your face. Eowyn.
She wanted so badly to be separated from that responsibility, but now she accepts it as an important part of who she is and how important her relationship with her uncle and her king really is to her.
I am going to save you.
You already did.
Notably, this is only in the movie, so I'm honestly not sure we get a similar step in the book, but I'll come back to that. The ninth step is to make peace with the masculine. For this, we have to turn to either the extended version, very briefly, or the books. Essentially, it means forgiving her masculine ally for letting her down and accepting that he couldn't save her from everything.
The men have found their captain. They will follow you into battle, even to death. You cannot abandon the men.
So we have this brief bit where Aragorn heals her. In the books, he emphasizes how, 1, important it is for Éomer to help, and 2, that she will need healing from another source besides himself. So the piece is rocky, I suppose, but she does not really need to speak to him again in either medium because she's moved past him, and made peace with his rejection. So she accepts him more as a person and future king instead of her savior.
I wished you joy since first I saw you.
The final step is where the heroine integrates the masculine and the feminine. For Eowyn, this means accepting who she is as a woman, but not only seeing that as a cage around her. And it does not happen in the movies at all, unless you count this bit.
I do not believe this darkness will endure.
So I'm going to explore this more in the next section. Now, one thing to keep in mind with these movies is that there are a lot of plot threads to keep track of and a lot of characters to adapt. I had read the books and was very excited to see my favorite character on screen by the time The Two Towers was released. I made a cosplay dress to go see it and everything, which, for those of you younger than me, was a pretty niche hobby before Comic-Cons and Marvel premieres. Fortunately, have made it more commonplace. So I was pretty thrilled to see her in both movies. And I totally understood how Return of the King was already a very long movie, and some of the falling action from the book had to be cut. But now, I think her story suffers from the lack of payoff in the films. In both of them, actually. We see her upset to go into the caves in Two Towers. We see her go in them. And then this is the only moment we see her again. And eagle-eyed viewers may notice that Aragorn is not dressed in his Helm's Deep armor. He's dressed the same way as here. Meaning this is just an alternate version of his return, and we actually never see her after Helm's Deep. I mean, that's fine. We get that narrative resolution here in the next movie, which is actually closer to the book anyway. But then, in Return of the King, she decides to abandon everything and ride to war. She gets this one cool scene and then is basically never heard from again. In the theatrical version, sure, we get her smiling at Faramir, so if you know, you know.
Oh! Well, here's a sight I have never seen before.
The extended version has this bit in the Houses of Healing, and they imply a lot from what happens in the book, but it was left on the cutting room floor with her other scenes. So as much as this is my favorite movie series ever made, I must say I am disappointed in how one of the most important female characters in literature was treated by the films, at least in terms of closure, because this moment,
I am no man,
is actually not her most important one to include. So let's get into that. Alright, finally, let's get into the claims of her ending being a sexist one. I have seen a lot of comparison to the Disney princesses, saying that her ending of falling in love with Faramir robs her of agency and implies that, ladies, all of your problems will be solved if you just get married. And obviously I've been spending a lot of time addressing that claim with the princesses, so let's analyze it here.
The situation's a lot more nuanced than that.
And this is going to be a bit of a deep dive into the book, so get ready to see this scene over and over because it's really all we have to work with.
Where is the rest?
This is all we could say, my lady.
There are 2 chapters that were adapted into these scenes. First, in the Houses of Healing, we get some insight into Eowyn by Aragorn and Éomer talking about her. Éomer can't understand what she's doing here, and Aragorn explains that Wormtongue was poisoning her too. That's where this line comes from.
Who knows what you've spoken to the darkness? The walls of your bower closing in about you.
Aragorn is unable to wake her, but Éomer calling her brings her back. She says that she has no hope, but will gladly remain to fill an empty saddle and go to war again. Aragorn tells the healers she will need to rest for 10 days at least, though she will not want to, and then they leave to go do war stuff.
We cannot achieve victory through strength of arms.
Not for ourselves.
So let's review where Eowyn is on her character journey. She has fallen into despair about her future and the future of her country, partially because of what Wormtongue said, partially because Aragorn rejected her. When he is there to heal her, it seems that she has moved on from him, but she has nothing to live for except the possibility of doing more deeds of renown.
He has as much cause to go to war as you.
her arc is definitely not resolved then, even though the movies imply that it is. So back to the story. The next chapter is the steward and the king, after the host has ridden out to be
a diversion.
And 2 days later, Eowyn refuses to stay abed any longer. You can read this all yourself. It's a great chapter, but here are the important bits. Eowyn goes to see the warden, who talks about the dichotomy of Aragorn, both wielding a sword and being a healer. Put a pin in that for later. She tells him this line,
"Those without swords can still die upon them."
And then says she would rather die in battle than be healed, just to make it really obvious that my girl needs more of a resolution to her arc. Anyway, she basically asks to see the manager when he won't let her leave the Houses of Healing, so he takes her to Faramir. He tells her that they are both prisoners of the healers and they will both have to endure with patience the hours of waiting. I think this is an important step for her to understand that she is not alone here, but that others may feel the same way that she does. Since she was really the only noble lady in Edoras for a long time, both Theoden's wife and her own mother died when she was quite young, this is likely the first time she's felt that kind of connection instead of just feeling left out.
Let me stand at your side.
It is not in my power to command it.
And the text backs up my interpretation of her reaction to Faramir by saying, she softened as though a bitter frost were yielding to the first presage of spring. Then she quietly laments that her window does not face east. Faramir smiles at that and tells her that he will tell the warden to let her walk in the garden with him and they can look east together. She is skeptical of why he would want to walk with her, and he says some very nice things about how pretty she is, but also, more importantly to her, that they have both passed under the wings of the shadow and the same hand drew us back. She tells him she is a shield maiden and her hand is ungentle, but she does show up in the garden the next morning. In the meantime, Faramir has asked the warden and then Merry to tell him all they know about her. So then the next few days pass with them in the garden every day, now in silence, now in speech, but pretty much spending all of their time together. After 5 days, this happens. We get a whole scene of Eowyn and Faramir on this day, but here's just a couple noteworthy things. First, she is wearing a blue mantle that he gave her, which was his mother's. Kind of a big deal. Then she talks about how he rode out several days ago and is vague on whom she means. Faramir says these days have brought him joy and is worried that he'll lose it. She tells him he won't, but let's not talk about it, and then says this bit.
I stood upon the brink. It was utterly dark in the abyss before my feet. A light shone behind me, but I could not turn. I could only stand there, waiting.
But not as a dream, this is just how she's currently feeling. She draws close to him when he mentions darkness unescapable. He answers with this.
I do not believe this darkness will endure.
And kisses her brow. Then the eagles come to announce that the enemy is defeated. So to unpack all of that, I think it's pretty clear that Faramir has fallen for her and is concerned about if she reciprocates. She doesn't want to talk about it, but she's not hung up on Aragorn anymore and obviously draws comfort from being with Faramir. And just like as a woman, you do not accept gifts from your guy friend that belonged to his mother unless, you're at least open to a romantic relationship.
It was a gift.
And I sort of feel like I'm explaining a joke to get into why this is romantic. But I would just like to point out that this is the only romantic pairing where getting together is part of the main plot. Arwen, as I talked about in this video, is hardly present and pretty much just shows up to get married. Eowyn and Faramir are already fully fleshed out characters before they meet, and the story takes the time to develop their relationship further. And yeah, we don't get details on what they talked about for 5 days that led them to developing feelings, but their character foils, they have so much in common. And here they are at the literal end of the world together. That's like like the height of romance.
I don't think now's the best time!
Now may be the only time!
Okay, so some time passes, and I would love to go through the next scene beat by beat because it's honestly masterfully written drama, but essentially, the heroes are at Caer Andros and invite Merry, Faramir, and Eowyn to join them. Merry goes. Faramir has to do his job to prepare for the returning king, so he leaves the Houses of Healing, but he stays in the city. And Eowyn does not go. She just stays in the houses, even though her brother begs her to join him. The warden gets worried about Eowyn and sends for Faramir. He confronts her about not going, and she asks him if he knows why she has not.
Do you not know?
He says it's either because she still loves Aragorn and doesn't want to see him in all his glory, or because she wants to stay near him and he hasn't left. Then he confesses his love for her, saying, "Once I pitied your sorrow, but now, were you sorrowless? Were you the blissful queen of Gondor? Still would I love you. Eowyn, do you not love me?" And now we get to the few sentences that people usually cite as what they object to, so I'm going to quote them exactly. In response to this declaration of love, the book says, "Then the heart of Eowyn changed, or else at last she understood it, and suddenly her winter passed, and the sun shone on her. I stand in Minas Arnor, the tower of the sun," she said, "and behold, the shadow has departed. I will be a shield maiden no longer, nor vie with the great riders, nor take joy only in the songs of slaying. I will be a healer, and love all things that grow and are not barren. No longer do I desire to be a queen." We're gonna unpack that, but the next bit is very sweet. Faramir says, "That is well, for I am not a king," and then asks her to marry him, so they can go to Ithilien and make a garden together. She wants to know if he would have people say, "There goes a lord who tamed a wild shield maiden." He says, "I would," and then kisses her, right there on the wall in front of everybody. So let's dive into all of that. Yeah, it does seem like a quick turnaround from before, suddenly being free of her depression. And so the main criticism is that, romantic love doesn't solve mental illness or whatever. But let's go back to what I talked about in the first part. This story is about what happens in the face of hopelessness and despair, and how the enemy wins by making you think you're powerless. For Eowyn, she was falling deeper into despair as she watched her king wither and her country fall apart.
Alas, that these evil days should be mine, that I should live to see the last days of my house.
She has hope when Aragorn shows up because she wants an escape, but he rejects her. So now she has no hope for her own future. After they are saved from the world ending, she falls back into depression because Faramir leaves, but I would say this is more than just him leaving.
You cannot abandon the men.
Her only desire lately was to die in battle, to go out and win renown, hopefully without returning. But the war is over. Her brother survived to be king of Rohan, Aragorn will be king of Gondor, and neither of them have any need of her. So she gets depressed. What is a shield maiden to do during times of peace? Then Faramir comes back and tells her how he feels, and that he has a plan for their future, to go to Emin Arnen and make a home there. So she's gonna escape Rohan, where she felt trapped, and also has a new purpose in life. So you can be frankly short-sighted and say it is sexist to have a woman's happy ending include a family and a garden, but that's literally what Sam Gamgee, the hero of Lord of the Rings, gets as well.
You have so much to enjoy, and to be, and to do.
Because Tolkien 100% believed that this is the happiest ending a person could get, regardless of gender. If you think her getting married at the end is sexist, I do wonder what ending you think she would have preferred. She was a lonely and miserable woman, aching for some kind of connection, and seeing the only strong bonds around her were between warriors. So she tried to become a queen by marrying the greatest warrior she had met, but that did not work. And then she became a warrior herself.
Ride with me.
But it did not fulfill her, because all of this was just running away from the darkness. But then she finds someone who understands her, who passed under the same shadow. And yeah, they could have been platonic, but marrying Faramir gives her a way to leave Rohan entirely. And for him to leave Gondor. And they get to create the life they want in a totally new place. The war is over, and it is essential for her to find a way to live during peacetime. So I feel like the complaint about how marrying a man solves all a girl's problems would only apply if she married Aragorn. That was really what she thought she wanted, after all, to be saved by him and to be lifted far above the mean things that crawl on the earth. Tolkien did not give her that ending because he thought Aragorn was too serious for her. And I think her story would definitely send the wrong message about just waiting around for a man to save you if she had ended up with him. Instead, she ends up with Faramir, a man who went through all the same things and who understands her in a way that no one else does. So I'm not saying getting married will cure your mental illness, but being with someone who understands it is going to be a much better situation. And I will admit that suddenly deciding to become a healer is a bit more of a surprise, but I think it's meant to telegraph how this broken and damaged woman now considers healing more important than dying in battle, which is explicitly the opposite of what she felt like at the beginning of this section. And if you want to say that it's a cliche for women to always end up doing healing things or whatever, the main heroes of the story are healers and gardeners, and those are the most heroic traits that Tolkien emphasized. So Eowyn doing this as well should not be read as diminishing her character. Not all of the ladies in this story end up associated with healing. Eowyn does because her ability to heal is essential to her own conflict.
I would have you smile again. You shall live to see these days renewed.
May they be blessed.
No more despair.
So, is this a sexist ending? No, I don't really think so. First, her wanting to rebel against her expected gender roles is not treated as a bad thing earlier, so she's not being punished for it here. This ending is not telling her to get back in the kitchen or whatever.
It's good.
Really?
Second, it makes sense for her character to choose Faramir over anyone else and over being alone. Being alone is the cause of a lot of her suffering, and he has just everything in common with her, so he's perfect. Third, her decision to choose healing after all she's been through is absolutely essential for her personally to get closure. So yeah, it's a great ending. If only it had been included in the movies. So, is Eowyn a feminist icon or the result of sexism? Well, as I said, her rebelling against societal norms is obviously pretty girl boss of her. But she doesn't do that to change things for women. She's just doing it because they're oppressive to her specifically. So that kind of dampens the feminist icon argument, but I'll come back to it. And how about that sexist ending where she settles down and pops out some kids? Well, sure, but almost all of the named characters in the story do that. Like, Legolas, Gimli, and Frodo all go to Valinor instead, but you can read in the appendices how pretty much everyone else got hitched and procreated. So, as I've argued earlier, it's clearly more that Tolkien wanted happy, settled endings for all of his characters, rather than singling her out specifically for it. And Eowyn gets to have the love story of the book. She's not bent or changed to end up with Faramir. So when she does change, it's only in that now she wants to live when before she did not. And that lines up with a significant point Tolkien was making, which has to do with how the rest of the stories end. And specifically with Frodo. Frodo Baggins is a hero because he keeps taking that one more step, even when all else looks dark. And how does Frodo end the story? Well, he goes back to the Shire, but he does not take much part in the Scouring. The movies condense the time frame, but here's the essential question.
How do you pick up the threads of an old life?
The answer for Frodo is that you can't. And it is the same for Eowyn and Faramir. But unlike Frodo, who leaves Middle-earth because he cannot recover from his trauma, Eowyn and Faramir demonstrate how to fully heal.
Some hurts that go too deep, that have taken hold.
I do not believe this darkness will endure.
So what I'm saying is that this is hugely important to what Tolkien had to say about war. Essentially, that being able to cultivate a garden and to heal the living things around you are much more important skills than battle strategy.
Shire must truly be a great realm, Master Gamgee, where gardeners are held in high honor.
I think excising this whole section was not like taking out Tom Bombadil or the Barrow Downs. Those aren't especially important to the story, but this chapter goes deep into how two people who were intending to die to ease their suffering find a way to build a life instead. Tolkien clearly thought of Eowyn as essential to his overall story, but not for this part.
I am no man.
But for this one, he was at war and in the trenches where there would be no forward movement and you just had to wait for your doom to be decided. That's why the character he related to is here, waiting, instead of being out there in the battle. And that's why Eowyn is here too. Because yeah, she got this big, iconic moment. She won her renown. But what did it bring her? A broken arm and no hope for the future. Faramir gives her hope, both in this moment and for her own future. She gives up the warlike pursuits that were really just symptoms of her own misery to do something that will matter in the peace that they are all building. And based on where she started out, that is exactly the kind of ending she deserves to have. So I think that makes her one of the biggest feminist icons I've ever experienced. She is allowed to be messy, angry, upset with the world she lives in, and to be publicly, dramatically in pain. And she's not vilified for it. She's not some silly girl trying to join the boys. What she's going through is taken seriously, as is her reaction to it. Her story is given equal weight to the men around her, and she is not there just to provide story fuel for someone else. My only criticism is that the essential healing process was cut almost entirely from the movies. It both weakens her story and causes the movies to deviate somewhat from one of the book's main themes. However, I would still say she's one of the best female characters around, and she certainly resonates strongly with young women who often feel the same way. She meant a lot to me when I was 14, and she still does today. And that is what really makes her a feminist icon.
You are fair and brave and have much to live for, many who love you.
Alright, thank you for listening to me talk about one of my all-time favorite characters. I'm gonna take a short break for the holiday, but I'll be back at the end of January to talk about Mulan. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, tip me on coffee, support me on Patreon, all of the things so you don't miss it. See you then!